In the 1950s, there was a man who was a phenomenon. Handsome, self-assured, with a voice as smooth as Tennessee whiskey, he embodied the golden age of country music. He had produced a string of almost unbelievable hits, was at the peak of his career, and married one of country music's royal families. This is not just the story of a forgotten star, it is a deeply human exploration of fame, love, and the radical choice to define success on one's own terms. It's the story of a man who had it all, only to discover that it all was something else entirely. His name was Carl Smith. To truly grasp the magnitude of Carl Smith's rise, you have to transport yourself back to the America of the late 1940s and early 1950s. The nation was exhaling after the collective trauma of World War II. A generation of young men had returned from overseas eager to build lives, start families, and chase a new hard-won American dream. There was a palpable sense of forward motion, of prosperity and progress, but beneath it lay a deep yearning for things that felt solid, authentic, and real. The culture was a fascinating mix of burgeoning modernity and a fierce attachment to traditional values. This was the era of the baby boom, of burgeoning suburbs and the shiny promise of new technologies like television. Yet it was also an era where the heart of the country still beat to a rural rhythm. In this landscape, country music was undergoing a powerful transformation. For decades, it had been seen as regional folk music, the sound of the Appalachians and the rural South. But now, thanks to the power of radio, its reach was expanding dramatically. The Grand Ole Opry, broadcast live from Nashville every Saturday night on WSM's Clear Channel signal, wasn't just a show, it was a national institution. Families across America would gather around their radios to hear the voices of Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, and a troubled, transcendent poet named Hank Williams. This was the music of everyday life, of heartbreak and joy, of Saturday night sin and Sunday morning redemption. The sound itself was changing too. The old-timey string bands were giving way to a harder, more electric sound forged in the rowdy bars and dance halls of Texas and the Southeast, a sound they called honky-tonk. It was music with a backbone, driven by crying steel guitars, walking bass lines, and a steady, danceable drum beat. Lyrically, it was unflinchingly honest, tackling adult themes of love, loss, and temptation with a raw, poetic grace. This was the world that was waiting for a new kind of star. Nashville was solidifying its status as Music City, with recording studios like Castle Studio becoming hit factories, and producers like the visionary Don Law at Columbia Records scouting for talent that could capture the spirit of the age. They weren't looking for flawless pop singers. They were looking for authenticity, for voices that carried the weight of experience. They needed someone who could embody the confidence of this new America while still speaking the timeless language of the heart. And in 1950, a young man from Maynardville, Tennessee, walked into that world ready to claim his throne. Carl Milton Smith was born on March 15, 1927, in a small town that was pure, unadulterated East Tennessee. Maynardville wasn't a place you passed through on the way to somewhere else. It was a destination in itself, a community nestled in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, where life was governed by the seasons and the church calendar. Music wasn't a commodity. It was a part of the social fabric. It was played on front porches after a long day's work, sung in the pews on Sunday morning, and celebrated at community barn dances. It was in this environment that Carl grew up. He was a quiet, observant boy, drawn to the melodies he heard on the family radio. He got his first guitar by selling garden seeds from a catalog, a small act of youthful enterprise that hinted at the business-savvy man he would become. He taught himself to play his fingers finding the chords to the Carter family songs and Jimmy Rogers tunes that filled the airwaves. His talent was immediately obvious. He had a natural charisma and a voice that was unusually rich and mature for his age. He began playing on local radio shows in nearby Knoxville, most notably on WROL, where he became a local favorite. These early performances were his apprenticeship, teaching him how to connect with an unseen audience, how to phrase a lyric, and how to command a stage, even if that stage was just a corner of a small radio studio. After a stint in the Navy during the final year of World War II, he returned to Tennessee more determined than ever to make music his life. He formed a band, the Crooning Cowboys, and his reputation continued to grow. The big prize, however, was always Nashville. In 1950, he got his break. A demo tape found its way to Don Law at Columbia Records, who recognized something special in Carl's smooth yet masculine delivery. He offered him a recording contract. The impact was meteoric. Carl Smith didn't just have a few hits, he unleashed a torrent. His first major success, Let's Live a Little One, cracked the top 10 in 1951. It was followed by a relentless succession of smashes that would define the sound of country music for the decade. His first #1 hit, Let Old Mother Nature Have Her Way, was a perfect showcase of his appeal. A confident, slightly swaggering vocal performance over a classic honky-tonk shuffle. He possessed a unique ability to sound both rugged and refined. He could deliver a heart-wrenching ballad like Are You Teasing Me with genuine vulnerability, and then turn around and sing a playful up-tempo number like When You Feel Like You're in Love. Don't just stand there, with a knowing wink in his voice. One of his most iconic hits, Hey Joe, became a signature song. It wasn't the later rock anthem made famous by Jimi Hendrix, but a clever call-and-response tune written by Boudleaux Bryant. Carl's version, with its infectious rhythm and conversational style, was a massive success and demonstrated his versatility. Then there was Loose Talk, a cautionary tale about gossip that resonated deeply in the small-town culture many of his listeners knew so well. Backing him was his superb band, the Toonsmiths, a crack outfit of Nashville session players who provided the perfect musical framework for his vocals. With their tight rhythms and tasteful instrumental fills, they helped shape a sound that was both commercially accessible and artistically credible. From 1951 to 1956, Carl Smith was arguably the most consistent hitmaker in country music. He placed an astonishing 21 consecutive singles in the Billboard Top 10, a record of dominance that few have ever matched. He became a fixture on the Grand Ole Opry, his handsome features and impeccably tailored nudie suits making him a visual standout. The press and his fans began calling him Mr. Country, a nickname that perfectly captured his image. He was the complete package, the voice, the looks, the hits, and an air of effortless confidence. He was the king of a kingdom he had helped build, and his reign seemed destined to last forever. As his star ascended in the musical firmament, Carl Smith's personal life became intertwined with the very heart of the country music dynasty. In the close-knit world of Nashville, where everyone knew everyone, his path inevitably crossed with that of the Carter family, the foundational group of the genre. Specifically, he was drawn to the vivacious, talented, and utterly captivating June Carter. June was country music royalty, the daughter of the legendary Maybelle Carter. She was a gifted singer, a natural comedian, and possessed an irresistible on-stage energy. When she and the handsome chart-topping Carl Smith began their courtship, it was the stuff of fan magazine dreams. They were the genre's golden couple, a perfect union of talent, looks, and pedigree. They married on July 9, 1952, in a ceremony that captured the attention of the entire country music world. For a time, their life seemed idyllic. They were young, in love, and at the absolute pinnacle of their respective careers. They represented a new generation of country stars, modern and glamorous, yet still deeply connected to the roots of the music. In 1955, their daughter, Rebecca Carlene Smith, was born. Known to the world as Carlene Carter, she would grow up to become a formidable singer-songwriter in her own right, bridging the legacy of her Carter bloodline with the honky-tonk heritage of her father. But the fairy tale was not destined to last. The very forces that made them a power couple also created immense strain on their relationship. Both Carl and June had demanding careers with grueling tour schedules that often sent them in opposite directions for weeks, even months at a time. The life of a touring musician in the 1950s was a relentless grind of long drives, lonely hotel rooms, and constant public pressure. Nurturing a young marriage and raising a child under such conditions was an almost impossible task. By 1956, the cracks had become too deep to repair, and they divorced. The end of their marriage was a public affair, fodder for gossip columns and speculation. Yet what followed was perhaps the most remarkable part of their story. In a testament to both their characters, there was no lasting bitterness. Carl remained a devoted father to Carlene, and he maintained a surprisingly warm and enduring relationship with the entire Carter family. When June later fell in love with and married the volatile and brilliant Johnny Cash, Carl didn't become a resentful ex-husband. Instead, he became a friend. He and Johnny Cash, two giants of the industry, developed a mutual respect. It was a mature and graceful handling of a difficult situation that revealed a quiet strength and integrity in Carl's character. He understood that family connections, especially in the world of country music, were sacred, and he refused to let the end of his marriage sever those bonds. A year after his divorce in 1957, Carl found a love that would provide him with the stability and partnership he craved. He married Goldie Hill, another successful country artist. Goldie, known as the Golden Hillbilly, had enjoyed her own string of hits, including the #1 song, I Let the Stars Get in My Eyes. But unlike the high-wattage spotlight that followed June Carter, Goldie was a more private person. She eventually made the decision to step back from her own career to focus on their family and life together. Theirs was a different kind of love story, not a fairy tale romance played out on the public stage, but a deep, quiet, and profoundly enduring partnership. They built a life together far from the epic drama of the Carter Cash saga. Their marriage would last for nearly 50 years, until Goldie's death in 2005. She was his anchor, his confidant, and the person who would stand beside him as he made the most momentous decision of his life, to leave the world of music behind and embrace the quiet life he had always, perhaps secretly, yearned for. This enduring love with Goldie became the foundation upon which he built his second act, a life defined not by applause, but by peace. The winds of change began to blow through the music industry in the late 1950s and early 1960s. A young man from Memphis named Elvis Presley had taken the raw energy of rhythm and blues and country music, fused them together, and created rock and roll. The British invasion, led by the Beatles, would soon follow, completely upending the landscape of popular music. In Nashville itself, a new sound was emerging. In an effort to make country music more palatable to a mainstream pop audience, producers like Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley began smoothing out the rough edges of honky-tonk. They replaced the crying steel guitars and fiddles with lush string sections, vocal choirs, and a more polished production style. This became known as the Nashville sound. For a traditionalist like Carl Smith, these changes presented a significant challenge. His entire career was built on the foundation of authentic, straightforward honky-tonk. While he continued to record and tour, and even scored some hits into the 60s and 70s, the consistent chart-topping dominance he had once enjoyed began to wane. His sound, which had once been the cutting edge of country music, was now seen by some as old-fashioned. This brings us to a central debate about Carl Smith's legacy. Was his eventual withdrawal from the music industry a quiet surrender to these changing tastes, an admission that his time in the spotlight had passed? Or was it something else entirely, a conscious and deliberate choice made from a position of strength? There is certainly an argument to be made that the industry was leaving him behind. Unlike artists like Ray Price or Patsy Cline, who successfully adapted to the Nashville sound, Carl largely stuck to his guns. He was a honky-tonk singer at heart, and he seemed unwilling or unable to compromise his musical identity. Some might view this as a form of artistic integrity, a refusal to chase trends. Others might see it as a commercial misstep that hastened the decline of his chart success. He watched as the music he loved was increasingly marginalized by both rock and roll on one side and slick pop-inflected country on the other. It's not difficult to imagine a sense of disillusionment setting in. However, this interpretation overlooks a crucial aspect of Carl Smith's character, his remarkable business acumen. From the very beginning of his career, Carl was more than just a singer. He was a savvy investor. He wisely put his earnings into various business ventures, most notably a highly successful music publishing company. This financial independence gave him a freedom that very few of his contemporaries possessed. He wasn't reliant on the next hit record or the next sold-out tour to pay his bills. He didn't have to compromise his sound or chase after a fleeting trend to stay afloat. He had built his own safety net, brick by brick, hit by hit. This financial security is the key to understanding his ultimate decision. His retirement wasn't a retreat forced by failure. It was a strategic exit made possible by foresight and success. He had played the game of fame, and he had won. But he came to realize that winning didn't mean playing forever. It meant earning the right to choose when and how to walk off the field. The controversy, then, is not one of scandal or failure, but one of motivation. Did he leave because he had to, or because he wanted to? The evidence strongly suggests the latter. He was a man who saw the storm clouds of musical change on the horizon, and rather than being caught in the rain, simply decided to go home, having already built himself a sturdy and comfortable house. The long-term impact of Carl Smith's career is twofold, encompassing both his musical contributions and the powerful statement made by his life's trajectory. Musically, his legacy is firmly cemented in the golden age of honky-tonk. He was a crucial figure in defining the sound of the 1950s. His smooth, confident vocal style brought a new level of polish and professionalism to the genre, proving that a country singer could be both raw and refined. He set a standard for male vocalists that would influence countless artists who followed. You can hear echoes of his easygoing swagger in the work of singers like George Strait and Alan Jackson, artists who built their careers on a foundation of traditional country music, delivered with modern confidence. His incredible run of chart hits speaks for itself, and his induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2003 was a long overdue acknowledgement of his status as one of the genre's true architects. He was, in every sense of the word, Mr. Country. But perhaps his more profound and lasting significance lies in the story of his second act. The world of country music is filled with tragic figures, artists like Hank Williams and Johnny Cash, who battled demons in the public eye, whose immense talents were often matched by immense personal pain. Their stories, while compelling, have created a pervasive trope of the self-destructive country star. Carl Smith offers a powerful and necessary counter-narrative. He is the antithesis of the tragic hero. He faced the same pressures of fame, the same grueling lifestyle, but he chose a different path. He demonstrated that it was possible to achieve the highest levels of success and then walk away, not into darkness, but into a life of peace and personal fulfillment. His decision to dedicate his life to raising and training cutting horses was not a whim. It was a return to his roots. It was an embrace of a life connected to the land, to animals, and to the quiet rhythms of nature. In doing so, he provided a different model of success. He taught a quiet lesson that true wealth isn't measured in record sales or sold-out arenas, but in autonomy, the freedom to choose your own path. In an industry that often consumes its brightest stars, Carl Smith managed to preserve his soul. He proved that the end of a performing career doesn't have to be an end at all, but can be the beginning of a new and perhaps more meaningful chapter. His legacy, therefore, is not just in the grooves of his old vinyl records, but in the quiet dignity of his choices. He reminds us that the most courageous act can sometimes be the refusal to perform, the decision to simply be. He mattered then as a hitmaker who defined an era, and he matters now as a symbol of a life lived with integrity, foresight, and a profound understanding of what truly brings contentment. So we return to that winding country road, to the farm in Franklin, Tennessee. The stage lights have long since gone dark, the roar of the crowd has faded into a distant memory, replaced by the sound of wind in the trees, and the steady rhythmic breathing of horses in a quiet barn. Here, Carl Smith, Mr. Country, found his final and most authentic stage. His story is a gentle but persistent whisper against the loud clamor of modern celebrity culture. It asks us a fundamental question. What is the true measure of a life? Is it the height of the mountain you climb or the peace you find in the valley below? Carl Smith reached the summit. He saw the world from a vantage point few ever experience. He heard the adulation, felt the incandescent glow of fame, and held it all in the palm of his hand. But he had the wisdom to recognize its fleeting nature and the courage to seek something more enduring. His journey wasn't about rejecting his past, but about honoring his truest self. The same authenticity that resonated in his honky-tonk hits was the guiding principle of his life. He was a man who sang about real life and then chose to live one, far from the artifice and demands of the world he had conquered. He found his encore not in front of a microphone, but in the simple, honest work of a horseman, a husband, and a father. He left behind a legacy of incredible music, but also a more profound legacy of a life lived with quiet grace and unwavering self-possession. Carl Smith's greatest hit wasn't a song. It was the peaceful and contented silence he chose for himself.